Ethan Montgomery's small fingers trembled around the soft, sky pool fabric of his airplane toy as he stepped through the polished door into the first-class cabin of Flight NS-120. The gentle hum of the jet's engines vibrated underfoot, a low reassurance for some, but a steady drumbeat of anxiety for him. At 8 years old, Ethan lived in a body that betrayed him sometimes. His muscles stiffening without warning, his speech box silent despite the words racing through. This was his first solo flight, and his heart pounded like thunder in his chest as he followed the cabin's curved aisle toward his assigned seat. He paused just long enough to admire the plush cream leather chairs, each one wider than a couch with generous headrests and armrests that hinted at luxury he barely felt worthy to occupy. Overhead, soft amber lights cast a warm glow, and each seat boasted its own personal screen, a reading lamp, and a fold-out tray already set with a neatly folded napkin and a slender set of silverware. But Ethan's eyes darted instead to the flight attendant standing near the front, her crisp navy uniform sharply pressed, her posture like a naval officer's. He swallowed hard, rubbing his palm against his leg where the fabric of his jeans had gathered in an awkward wrinkle. He could feel every eye in the cabin on him, though he knew many were probably more interested in their own screens or the champagne cart. Gingerly, Ethan settled into seat 1B, the label denoting his privilege as a first-class passenger. His legs dangled just above the floor, the tips of his sneakers brushing the carpet printed with abstract golden swirls. He winced as he shifted. Prolonged sitting had a way of making his muscles seize up, turning each movement into a small puzzle of pain and relief. He pressed his back against the chair and let out a slow breath, counting silently 1, 2, 3. He reached down, pulled the safety belt across his lap, and clicked it into place, wincing at the sudden tug against his stiff hips. Beside him, the soft hum of conversation blended with the rustling of seatbelt signs clicking off and on. Business travelers in tailored suits and silk scarves murmured quietly among themselves, while a newlywed couple a few rows back clinked crystal glasses filled with sparkling cider. Some glanced at Ethan's bright toy, an airplane no larger than a paperback book, stitched in sky-new canvas with little embroidered wings, and then looked away, their expressions unreadable. Ethan pressed the toy against his chest, his small comfort anchor in this sea of strangers. He closed his eyes for a moment, willing his heartbeat to slow. A sudden voice drew his attention. "Mr. Montgomery?" A young flight attendant stood at his aisle, pale blue eyes assessing him carefully. She offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard. Can I help you with your tablet?" She pointed toward the sleek device lying on the tray next to Ethan's elbow. He shook his head, grateful for something to focus on besides the swirl of stairs. He lifted the tablet, tapped the screen, preloading his favorite soothing music playlist, and set it on his lap. The attendant's gaze flicked to his toy. "Is that your comfort item?" she asked, with a tone that suggested he might want to hide it. Ethan nodded. He remembered his mother's gentle instructions before boarding. "If you need anything or if someone treats you unfairly, just send me a message. I've got 60% of this airline, remember?" He forced a polite smile. It felt strange to think of his mother as the power behind the company. Her name, Olivia Montgomery, stamped on every uniform label and security file. He tucked the plush toy under his arm as she turned away, and for a moment relief washed over him. Maybe she wouldn't say anything more. Maybe they'd share this flight without incident. But when she strode toward the rear of the cabin, her shoulders stiff and her jaw set, Ethan's pulse accelerated again. He'd learned over the years not to trust sudden kindness. Sometimes it was just the calm before a storm. As he relaxed slightly, Ethan let his eyes drift to the overhead bins. Each compartment was marked with the names of passengers who paid thousands of dollars for these seats. VIPs, corporate executives, celebrities. He wondered if any of them knew about his own hidden power, his mother's majority stake and the influence she wielded behind the scenes. Yet here, confronted with these polished strangers and the unspoken rules of first-class decorum, he felt small and fragile. A hush fell over the cabin as final boarding announcements crackled through the PA. The seatbelt signs illuminated and the captain's voice, calm and clipped, welcomed everyone aboard and reminded them to stow their belongings. Ethan heard a soft click behind him. The curtain that separated first class from the cabin beyond was drawn, sealing him in his gilded cage. He hugged his toy tighter, his thoughts swirling. He thought of home, of the hand-painted airplane mural in his bedroom, of his mother's phone calls late at night discussing route expansions and quarterly reports. Here, none of that mattered. Here, he was just a little boy with a disability. He traced a finger over the embroidered wing on his toy airplane, feeling the tiny ridges beneath his palm, and closed his eyes again. He told himself to be brave, to be quiet. He told himself to remember his mother's words, "You're safe, and I'm right behind you." But in that moment, safety felt like a fragile promise. Somewhere behind him, a flight attendant slid the beverage cart into place, its wheels clicking softly against the aisle. Glassware tinkled and the scent of strawberries and cream drifted past. Ethan's stomach turned, not with hunger, but with the dread of anticipation. Whatever happened next, he knew he would have to face it alone until he could reach for his tablet and send the message that would change everything. He drew in a shuddering breath, his chest tightening. The cabin settled into a tense silence, an expectant pause before the real journey began. Ethan opened his eyes and looked forward, determined to endure whatever was coming. And as Flight NS-120 taxied toward the runway, that little plush airplane lay ready in his arms, a silent witness to the moment when privilege and prejudice would collide. The cabin lights had dimmed a notch as Flight NS-120 settled onto its cruising altitude, and a hush fell over the first-class section. Passengers reclined in their private pods, some drifting toward sleep, others scrolling through in-flight entertainment. Yet amid the soft ambient glow and muted engine hum, Ethan Montgomery sat rigid in his seat. Fingers still curled tightly around his sky-new fabric airplane. His heart thumped in time with the gentle vibration of the aircraft, each beat a reminder that he was trapped in this golden cage until London. Moments earlier, a new tension had crept in, subtle as the flutter of a moth's wing. Marcus Flynn, the first-class lead attendant, had paused just outside Ethan's row, clipboard in hand, scanning boarding passes with practiced efficiency. He wore a crisp navy uniform trimmed with gold braid, a uniform that signaled authority and exacting standards. He glanced at Ethan's ticket, then at the toy in the boy's lap, his pale blue eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Ethan tried to shrink into his chair, but there was nowhere left to go. He straightened, hugging the toy airplane closer, and pressed his lips together. He'd learned long ago that sudden stillness helped his legs, which stiffened unpredictably, but it did nothing to calm the roar in his head. "Sir?" Marcus's voice cut through the quiet, low, controlled, but unmistakably firm. Ethan looked up, startled. He blinked at the attendant and swallowed. Words didn't come easily for him. His speech device sat powered off in its compartment, the soft click of its latch a small betrayal. He opened his mouth, closed it again, his throat tightened as he tried to summon the response. "Where did you get that?" Marcus repeated, stepping forward just enough to loom over Ethan's shoulder. He pointed at the toy. "This is a first-class cabin. We have standards here. That thing belongs in economy." Ethan's pulse thundered. He knew the toy was his comfort item, his anchor. It was stitched by his mother, Olivia, on her day off, so its sky-new wings matched his first and only flying uniform. He pressed tighter, the plush fabric crumpling slightly under his grip. He tried a gesture, pointing at his chest and then at the toy, his eyes wide with panic. He needed to say, "It's mine," or "Please don't take it," but the words got caught like birds in a net. Behind him, a couple in tailored suits exchanged glances. The man leaned forward, feigned interest in the seatback screen, then settled back. No one volunteered to help. Ethan felt smaller by the second, exposed beneath Marcus's stern gaze. "Sir, you need to stow that," Marcus said, his tone unbending. He lowered his voice so only Ethan could hear, and yet each word seemed amplified in the hush. "This isn't a toy box, it's for serious passengers. Please, hand it over." Ethan's chest tightened. The cabin pressurization hissed softly, a reminder that they were miles above ground. He pictured his mother in her high-rise office, glass walls overlooking downtown LA. Olivia Montgomery, who held 60% of Blue Sky Air's shares and could reroute an entire crew with a single phone call. Yet here, he felt powerless. He knew she'd never want him to give up his comfort toy. She'd warned him before boarding, "Hold on to that toy. If you ever feel unsafe, just send me a text." But he was terrified to defy the uniformed attendant. His jaw set. He planted both feet firmly on the carpeted floor and shook his head, eyes locked on Marcus. The attendant's expression flickered. Surprise, then irritation. "Sir," he said again, soft but insistent, "you're making things difficult. I'm only asking you to comply." A tight wave of anger swelled in Ethan's chest. He didn't want to be difficult. He just needed that small piece of home to feel safe on this flight. He squeezed the toy's nose with his thumb and index finger. It was silly to cry in first class, but tears stung his eyes as he fought to keep them at bay. His breathing hitched. Marcus tapped his foot, clipboard braced against his hip. "Either you put that away, or I'll have to escort you to your seat in economy." His words were clipped. The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Ethan's mind raced. Economy class was the dreaded realm where untrained families and restless toddlers roamed free. His muscles tensed at the thought. He lifted the toy higher, hugging it to his chin. In the silence that followed, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. Even the low whir of the ventilation vented down to a whisper. Passengers peeked over their screens, unsettled by the tension. A single camera light blinked, part of the documentary crew filming Brawl for behind-the-scenes flight attendant life, and Ethan realized they had witnessed this moment too. He pressed his lips together, fighting the quiver in his throat. Marcus's jaw tightened. He leaned in, voice dropping almost to a whisper that nonetheless cut through the hush. "You think you're special because you're here in first class. But rules apply to everyone." He reached out, hand hovering over the toy. Ethan's heart jammed against his ribs. He flinched but held firm. He had to remember. "You're safe, and I'm right behind you." He tugged at his lapel, a silent reminder that his mother's power extended here, even if he couldn't see her. "No," he managed to think, if not speak, and turned his gaze forward. Marcus's hand snapped toward the toy, his expression darkening. "Fine," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Have it your way." He backed off, folding his arms with authority. Ethan exhaled, chest heaving, unaware that in that moment he'd lit a fuse. The attendant straightened, turned on his heel, and stalked back down the aisle. His posture was rigid, like a soldier retreating to regroup before an assault. Ethan sank into his seat, hands still clutching the toy. His breathing stuttered, half relief, half dread for what might come next. The other flight attendants exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The documentary crew stopped rolling, their cameras quietly lowered. A nervous ripple passed through the cabin. Ethan pressed the toy to his face, eyes closed, head bowed. He wished the engine hum would swallow his thoughts. Instead, his mind spun with anticipation. He hadn't meant to provoke Marcus Flynn. He'd only wanted to keep his security blanket close. But now, having stood his ground, he felt a strange mix of fear and quiet triumph. Somewhere in the distance, the beverage cart rolled past, glasses chiming softly. The cabin lights flickered as the captain adjusted the circuit breakers. Ethan opened his eyes and stared at the divider curtain, the threshold between the safety of his own space and whatever lay ahead. He didn't know what Marcus would do next, but he felt the first tremor of confidence. He could face this. He had to. He tapped the side of his tablet, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. The message app was ready, just waiting for the right moment. He swallowed, straightened his back, and lifted his chin. For the first time on this flight, he felt the weight shift. The quiet storm had begun, and Ethan Montgomery was standing at its eye. Ethan pressed his back into the plush cream leather of seat 1B, his fingers tightening around the sky-hued fabric of his little airplane toy. The cabin lights glowed softly overhead, the engines hum a steady undertone, but in that moment, the world narrowed to the tension coiling in his chest. Marcus Flynn's clipped footsteps had receded down the aisle, leaving behind a hush that seemed louder than any shout. He kept his eyes fixed on the fold-out tray in front of him, tracing the outline of the polished silver utensils with the tip of his thumb. Each inhale felt like a small victory, slow, deliberate. His heart still raced, but he refused to let it burst into tears. Not here, not now. Tears, he knew from past experience, would only draw more attention, more judgment. He settled his shoulders, pressing them down, as if pinning his fear to the seatback. A soft click sounded nearby. The documentary crew's camera swiveled away, but he sensed its lens had caught the encounter. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to see the flicker of shock on a stranger's face or the eager curiosity in a journalist's eye. He wanted only the toy and the quiet promise it carried, that he wasn't completely alone. He inhaled again, slower this time. Counted. 1, 2, 3, then exhaled, as if releasing a small gust of wind into the cabin's recycled air. He could almost feel the tension unwrapping from his shoulders, though his muscles still trembled. There was a dull ache behind his eyes, but he blinked it away, straightening his spine. Around him, the first-class cabin had returned to its measured calm. A flight attendant glided past with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, offering tiny tarts and cheese bites. Passengers in tailored jackets polished off champagne flutes, eyes flicking between plates and screens. Ethan's tray remained untouched. The edible luxuries tasted foreign to him, like a party he hadn't been invited to, so he stared instead at the faint pattern on the carpet, a swirl of gold and navy, letting its curves draw his mind away from the ache in his limbs. In the hush, his breathing sounded too loud. He could hear the soft click of another passenger's seatbelt latch, the rustle of a silk scarf, even the gentle scrape of a pen jotting notes in a small leather notebook. Everything seemed magnified. The very air felt heavy with expectation. He thought of home. His mother in her glass-walled office, her voice calm but firm as she'd reminded him, "Ethan, remember you're safe, and if you need me, just send the message." He closed his eyes and pictured her there, reaching for the phone, her silhouette tall against the city skyline. He could almost feel her presence. That thought steadied him more than any deep breath could. Ethan's muscles began to unclench, just a fraction. He shifted his grip on the toy, pressing its soft nose against his cheek. The sensation grounded him, reminded him that this was just another trial to endure. He drew in another breath. 1, 2, 3, and exhaled. He glanced at his tablet. Locked, screen dark. He had the technology, the power of his mother's majority stake in Blue Sky Air, but he didn't want to reach for it yet. Not until he had to. He needed to prove to himself that he could weather this storm on his own, that he could stand his ground without resorting to the nuclear option. He inched his head toward the aisle, eyes scanning the nearest flight attendant station. Mira, the young attendant who'd shown concern earlier, stood by the galley, her expression unreadable. She was the only one who'd looked at him with empathy. the only adult who had paused when Ethan's toy tumbled and righted it for him. He felt a flicker of gratitude, but also knew better than to expect intervention. She had duties to fulfill, scripts to follow, and a career to protect. He couldn't rely on anyone else. A soft ding echoed through the cabin. A seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers began stirring, stretching limbs, collecting their devices. Ethan sat perfectly still, hands clasped around the toy as if it were an anchor. He felt the pull of the moment. This was his chance to show himself he could endure. He straightened his chin, squared his shoulders, and stared straight ahead. He thought of the soft voice in his ear when he'd first learned to manage his anxiety. His speech therapist, Miss Flores, telling him, "Sometimes the bravest thing is to say nothing at all." She had taught him methods to calm himself, focusing on a small object, breathing in to the count of 4, breathing out to 6. He had practiced those techniques countless times, but never under such scrutiny. He closed his eyes once more, inhaled to the count of 4, then exhaled to 6, feeling the air move in soothing rhythms. He could almost hear Miss Flores's gentle encouragement, urging him onward. The cabin's ambient noises faded to a distant murmur. For a fleeting second he felt weightless, as though the stamped steel walls of the jet had disappeared and he was suspended between sky and cloud. When he opened his eyes, the world had returned, but he remained calm. No tears slid down his cheeks, no soft whimpers escaped his lips. He dared to feel a tiny spark of pride. He had not crumbled. He had not run or cried out. Instead, he had kept his promise to himself, to stand firm, to hold on to that little airplane toy, and to weather the storm. Outside his window, stars dotted the black canvas, distant and unblinking. A sliver of moon cast a pale glow across the wingtip, a reminder that even in darkness there was light. He touched the window glass, tracing the curve of the planet fading into space. It made him feel small, but also strangely safe. The world was vast, and here, in this moment, he was alive and unbroken. The cabin began to murmur again as the flight attendants prepared the next service run. Soft footsteps approached. Ethan's heart fluttered. Had Marcus Flynn returned? He held his breath, toy pressed against his heart, as the attendant glanced down the row and paused. Marcus's assistant, a young woman, met Ethan's gaze briefly, then looked away. She reached for a tray of warm towels and flicked a glance toward Ethan's seat, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Ethan held his breath until she moved on. He exhaled slowly, a silent sigh of relief. He sat back, letting the tray table click shut. He traced the edge of the button that would power on his tablet, but he resisted. This chapter of his journey was his own to navigate, through silent strength. He had proved something to himself, that he could endure, that he could stand his ground with nothing more than his own courage, and a little toy airplane. As the cabin lights dimmed even lower, the fumes settled into a lullaby, and Ethan finally allowed himself a small, private smile. His muscles still trembled, but underneath, a quiet power had taken root. The true test lay ahead, but for now, he was ready. Ethan's chest tightened as he settled deeper into his cream leather seat. Despite the soft amber glow overhead and the muted hum of the engines, there was an undercurrent of something larger at work, an invisible force watching everything. He didn't know exactly when the SkyGuard system had been installed, but he remembered the subtle red dot blinking on the camera above his head as he boarded. It wasn't just any camera. It was part of Blue Sky Air's new AI surveillance network, trained to flag safety risks and policy violations in real time. His fingers brushed the smooth frame of the overhead panel, where a tiny indicator light pulsed quietly. He'd never felt more self-conscious, yet beneath that tension was something else, a seed of confidence. A memory floated up from earlier that morning, before he'd even left the house. "Promise me you'll keep your toy close," his mother had said, her voice firm but gentle as she fastened the strap of his miniature sky blue airplane backpack. "And remember, I hold 60% of this airline. If anything goes wrong, you just send me a text. I'll handle the rest." Ethan had paused and looked up at her, the echoes of board meetings and high-level strategy sessions swirling behind her calm, brown eyes. He'd watched her stride confidently through the glass doors of Blue Sky Air's headquarters, her tailored suit immaculate, a phone clutched in one hand. At that moment, she was more than a parent. She was one of the most powerful figures in commercial aviation, capable of making entire crews disappear with a single command. Now, thousands of feet above the Pacific night, that memory felt like an anchor. He drew in a slow, steady breath, camera to the left, camera to the right, each one feeding live footage into the AI core. Any hint of trouble would ping a warning to the flight deck and Blue Sky's operations center simultaneously. He'd seen the promotional videos his mother had carefully vetted, how SkyGuard could identify slip-ups, from spilled champagne to unauthorized movement in crew-only zones. Tonight, it was silently tracking every heartbeat in first class. He glanced sideways at the small camera lens just above the aisle light. It gave him a strange comfort now. It meant someone, something, was watching for him too. He pressed the toy closer to his chest, feeling its soft wings against his hoodie. He wasn't just an 8-year-old boy with a disability, he was a Montgomery. And Montgomerys didn't get ignored. A ripple of movement passed through the cabin as the head flight attendant appeared again, clipboard in hand. Marcus Flynn's back was to Ethan this time, but Ethan didn't flinch. He sat up straighter, chin high, even as his heart fluttered. He'd survived the first round. He could survive the next. From the corner of his eye, he spotted Mira, the young attendant who had shown him kindness. Catching his glance, she offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. Ethan's lips curved in a tiny smile. That nod was permission enough. He had allies, however quiet, even if they couldn't speak his language. He slid his tablet from its compartment and flipped it open, the screen coming alive with soft light. He tapped into the message thread with his mother, fingers dancing over the touchscreen, even though words weren't his natural tool. He typed out a simple sentence. "Mom, it's tense here. I'm okay, but he might push me again." Then he paused. No, he didn't want help yet. He wanted her to know he could handle this alone, at least for now. He swiped up, and the message vanished into the digital ether, flagged to her phone immediately. She would get it. He didn't doubt that for a second. As he slid the tablet closed, the crew began the next round of service. Silver carts rolled down the aisle, laden with platters of gourmet hors d'oeuvres and chilled glasses of vintage non-alcoholic rosé. Ethan's favorite. He reached for a water carafe instead, unsteady fingers gripping the glass bottle as he poured. The moment the glass touched his lips, the cabin lights dimmed again and the captain's voice crackled through the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some mild turbulence over the next hour. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The announcement drew polite murmurs and passengers clicked their belts back into place. But for Ethan, the captain's words triggered something different. A demonstration of control, of authority, and a reminder that this flight, like so many others, was orchestrated by rules and voices that weren't always visible. He clutched his toy and considered how his mother's instructions gave him a new rule to follow. Never underestimate your own power. He closed his eyes and let the hum of the plane wrap around him. He pictured the operations center at Blue Sky's headquarters, a room filled with monitors and blinking lights, every camera feed from every flight streaming in real time. He knew his mother was there, poised to make a decision at a moment's notice. Whenever his message pinged, she would see exactly what had happened. He pictured Olivia Montgomery standing beside the CEO's chair, leaning forward as a screen displayed a live feed of the cabin. His cabin. He imagined her voice, calm and unwavering, delivering the order, terminate Marcus Flynn's contract. Immediate. He felt a surge of pride at the thought. Even the most rigid attendants could be undone by a single command from her. Meanwhile, in the hushed brightness of first class, Marcus Flynn approached the galley again. His jaw was tight, his movements brisk. Ethan watched as Marcus signaled Mira to bring him the flight manifest. He had to know Ethan's name, had to see that the boy he'd threatened was a Montgomery. In that split second before Mira returned, Ethan's heart hammered, but he held onto the toy like a lifeline. Mira slid the iPad across the counter. Marcus's eyes darted over the digital manifest, his finger hovering. He found Ethan's name. Ethan Montgomery, and the VIP tag next to it. He paused. He looked up, just for a breath, and caught Ethan's gaze. Their eyes locked. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. The camera above them blinked, and the AI core registered a spike in stress levels across the cabin. A soft beep, an alert on the SkyGuard console. He saw a glimmer of uncertainty flicker in Marcus's posture. Ethan swallowed. He sat still, the toy pressed tight to his chest, and met Marcus's eyes without flinching. He didn't smile or nod. He simply held the space between them. It was a challenge. You know who I am, you know what I can do. Marcus didn't speak. After a long beat, he closed the Manifest app and tucked the iPad under his arm. He straightened his shoulders and turned away, striding down the aisle as though nothing had happened. But Ethan knew better. He could feel the shift, the subtle retreat of aggression. Ethan exhaled, a soft breath that carried more relief than any word could express. He tapped the toy's embroidered wing once, twice, as if acknowledging a shared secret. The cameras swung gently above, their small lenses trained on him, the boy who refused to be minimized. Behind him, the cabin resumed its gentle rhythm. Glasses tinkled, laughter rose in muted tones, and the documentary crew's camera blinked off. Yet Ethan sat taller, a quiet strength filling his chest. He had emerged from the encounter changed. No longer just a scared boy in first class, but a Montgomery with power coursing through the wires of an airline, whispered through AI alerts, and carried in a single text message. His mother would see his message soon, he felt it in his bones, and when that moment came, the hidden strength he'd summoned in that tense heartbeat would snap into view, like a dam giving way. But for now, in the soft glow of his private pod, Ethan closed his eyes and allowed himself a single, triumphant thought. I am not invisible. A tense hush enveloped the first-class cabin of Flight NS-120 as the beverage cart made its way past Ethan's row. Glasses tinkled softly, and the muted chatter of high-profile guests floated through the warm, amber-lit space. For a moment, it seemed as if the world had forgotten the earlier confrontation, until Marcus Flynn reappeared. He strode down the aisle with the rigid precision of a drill sergeant, clipboard clutched under one arm. His pale blue eyes zeroed in on Ethan's seat like a hawk spotting its prey. The soft murmur of conversation died instantly. Every passenger seemed to sense the storm brewing before they even saw it. Ian sat frozen, fingers tightening on his Sky Humor toy airplane as if it were a lifeline. His heart pounded so loudly he could almost hear it above the hum of the engines. He glanced up at Marcus, whose lips were pressed into a thin line. There was no warmth there, only cold, clinical authority. "Mr. Montgomery," Marcus said, voice low but carrying through the silent cabin. He paused, letting the tension build. "I asked you earlier to stow your personal item. You're disrupting the experience for our first-class passengers." Ethan's chest constricted. He'd held on to that toy as long as he could because it was his security blanket. It helped his stiff muscles relax and kept his anxiety from spiraling. He swallowed hard, tried to call up a response, but his voice felt locked inside him. "Come now," Marcus continued, stepping closer. "Rules apply to everyone." He reached out and grabbed Ethan's toy airplane. The plush fabric yielded under his grip, and Ethan felt a hot surge of panic. "Hey!" Ethan finally managed to blurt, his voice catching in his throat. It sounded small and frightened, nothing like the confident tone he'd hoped for. He lunged forward, trying to snatch the toy back, but his movement was clumsy, and his chair clipped the armrest. "That's enough," Marcus snapped. His face darkened. In one swift motion, he cocked his hand and delivered a sharp slap across Ethan's small hands, sending the toy arching onto the carpet. The sound of fabric meeting floor seemed deafening in the sudden stillness. Ethan gasped, the sting radiating from his palms up his arms. His chest tightened. Tears sprung to his eyes before he could blink them away. He bit his lower lip, desperate to silence the whimper threatening to escape. The cabin froze. A single champagne flute wobbled as the cart rolled past, its contents sloshing dangerously close to spilling. A well-dressed woman turned away, pretending she hadn't witnessed the moment. A businessman scrolled on his phone, thumbs moving so fast they blurred, but his eyes never left Ethan's face. Ethan pressed his trembling hands against his chest, the warmth of tears soaking his shirt. He shrank into his seat, knees pulled up slightly, trying to become as small and unobtrusive as possible. His cheeks burned, and every instinct screamed for him to flee, to hide, to sink into the carpet. Marcus straightened, expression unyielding. "Please behave or I'll have to move you to economy." His voice held a cruel calm. It was punishment disguised as policy, an assertion of power to shame a child into compliance. Ethan closed his eyes, swallowing the lump in his throat. He thought of his mother's advice: breathe in 4, breathe out 6. He inhaled slowly, counting in his head, trying to draw strength from the rhythm. But the pain in his hands pulsed with each beat of his heart. A soft click in the ceiling drew his attention. The SkyGuard camera had focused on the incident, and he knew the AI was already flagging it as a violation. His chest warmed with a tiny spark of hope. Somewhere in the operations center, lights were blinking, alarms sparking, and a screen displaying his mistreatment. Somewhere his mother was about to see it. Behind him, Mira, the young attendant who had quietly offered assistance earlier, hovered at the galley entrance. Her mouth was a tight line, worry etched in her eyes. But she didn't step forward. She couldn't. She had her own responsibilities and a protocol to follow. Instead, she placed a gentle hand on her heart and turned away, as if standing what she'd witnessed was her silent protest. Ethan's breath caught as he watched Mira leave. He felt both gratitude for her empathy and frustration that no one would speak up openly. He glanced again at Marcus, whose heels clicked against the aisle carpet as he marched toward the rear of the cabin. The attendant's neat uniform swung in perfect alignment, as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Ethan's tears finally spilled over. He tried to blink them back, but they slid down his cheeks like tiny rivers. He pressed a knuckle against his eye to wipe them away, then froze, realizing every eye in first class traced the movement. A few heads tilted, expressions flickering from indifference to pity and back again. He curled his hands into fists, clutching the empty air where his toy had landed. He could retrieve it if he dared, but what if Marcus returned? What if someone else grabbed it again? He hesitated, feeling the weight of his disability in every muscle, the tremor in his legs that made him feel like a puppet with tangled strings. Then a small light blinked on his tablet. He hadn't touched it since Chapter 4. It was waiting for him. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand and leaned forward to tap the screen. A simple text box opened. "Mom, he just slapped me." His fingers hovered, heart hammering. He could send it now, summon his mother's intervention, but the cabin felt so heavy with shame. Would sending the message be admitting defeat? No, this wasn't defeat. This was justice waiting to happen. He pressed send. The tablet dinged softly. The text vanished into the digital ether. Somewhere in a high-rise office, Olivia Montgomery's phone buzzed. Ethan closed his eyes and held his breath. He listened to the faint scuttle of footsteps as flight attendants tucked their carts away. He felt the gentle vibration of the wing as the plane banked, the soft whir of the ventilation shifting. All around him, first-class passengers resumed their hushed conversations, but Ethan no longer cared. He sat up straighter, chest heaving, tears drying on his cheeks. He had made his stand. The world would soon respond. In that quiet moment, Ethan wasn't just an 8-year-old boy with a disability. He was a Montgomery, brave, unbroken, and ready for justice to take flight. Ethan kept his back pressed against the soft cream leather of his seat as he opened his tablet. The cabin lights, still a muted amber, cast long shadows across the aisles, and the gentle engine hum anchored him in the moment. His small fingers hovered over the screen, the memory of Marcus Flynn's slap still warm on his palms. He drew in a slow, deliberate breath, counting in his head, then tapped the camera icon. A tiny red dot appeared in the corner of the display, recording. And somewhere overhead, the SkyGuard camera blinked to life, streaming footage into Blue Sky Air's AI core. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just about capturing what had just happened, it was about building an indisputable record of every moment he endured from here on out. He angled the tablet so the front-fading lens framed his toy airplane tucked under one arm, then pivoted it slowly toward the aisle. In the dim glow, Marcus Flynn stood 10 feet away, clipboard in hand, his shoulders rigid, jaw set. Ethan's pulse raced. He held the device steady, making sure the attendant's name badge, F. Flynn, was clearly visible in the shot. His voice was too quiet to record, but he murmured under his breath, "Just stay calm, just stay calm." He adjusted his grip on his toy airplane and leaned forward, careful not to draw attention to himself. In the background, passengers reclined in their private pods, some scrolling through streaming movies, others sipping champagne. Their faces flickered on Ethan's screen, a silent jury to whatever came next. As the SkyGuard camera overhead captured the scene from another angle, its green indicator light blinking, Ethan felt a strange comfort. The AI system was designed to detect any policy violation, any safety risk. He'd watched his mother's demonstration videos. The moment someone crossed a line, a red alert popped up at the operations center, and on the captain's console, he imagined monitors lighting up in a control room downtown, analysts pausing mid-sip of their coffee as they realized what was unfolding in real time. He tapped the livestream icon next, an internal feed reserved for VIP incidents, yet hesitated. He didn't want the entire cabin to see just yet. He needed his mother to get the footage first. He tapped it off, content to rely on the AI's recording. Instead, he flicked to his messaging app and typed a quick note to Olivia Montgomery. "I'm recording now, he's back." He paused and held his finger over the send button. Not yet. He wanted to gather everything. Ethan steadied himself. He felt the faint tremor in his legs, a reminder that his body didn't always obey, but his mind was clear. He met Marcus's gaze through the screen, a challenge, unspoken but unmistakable, then drifted the camera back to himself. He closed one eye, framing his determined expression. No tears. He refused to let them see him break again. A soft chime on the tablet signaled the message draft had saved. Ethan tucked the tablet into his lap, leaving the screen face down so it looked like he was simply reading. He clasped his toy airplane tighter, its plush wings crumpling slightly under his grip. He felt a spark of pride. He was no longer defenseless. Moments later, Marcus approached from the galley, a crisp waypoint in Ethan's video. The attendant's polished shoes clicked purposefully, each step measured. Ethan leveled the camera again. He recorded Marcus's approach, the moment the man's gaze flicked downward, taking in Ethan's clutch on the toy. Their eyes met. An electric snap of tension, and Marcus's lips twitched, caught on film. Ethan's chest hummed. He'd wanted proof. Now he was making sure nothing could be denied. He filmed as Marcus stopped in front of him, clipboard raised, lips tightening. He wouldn't record the slap again. He didn't need to. He had it already. Now he was collecting context, the cold tone in Marcus's voice, the stony set of his shoulders, the way other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A soft glow from a passenger's reading lamp fell across a businessman's face as he turned to watch. Ethan panned the camera to include that man's expression. Mild shock, a touch of pity, and then the quick eagerness of someone seeing a sensational moment. Each detail mattered. He lingered on the SkyGuard indicator overhead, tiny but relentless, blinking green in the low light. He felt the AI's silent presence, catching every second. He whispered to himself, "You've got this." When Marcus finally pivoted and strode away, his gait stiff and clipped, Ethan slid the tablet closed. The red dot vanished, but he knew SkyGuard still had every frame. The AI would compile the clip, package it with time-stamped metadata, and send it to Blue Sky's ops team. He tapped the screen again, reopened the file manager, and renamed the recording incident_night_NS120. He tapped Protect to keep it from accidental deletion. A neighbor 2 rows back glanced at him curiously. Ethan offered a faint nod, not of apology, but of solidarity. The stranger returned a hesitant half-smile before looking away. Ethan felt the smallest thrill. He was connecting with allies, in silence. He set the tablet aside and closed his eyes for a moment, emotional fatigue washing over him. His muscles trembled, but inside he felt stronger than ever. He'd taken control of the narrative. He'd collected the evidence that would expose Marcus Flynn and, through him, ensure justice. He stared down at the carpet's golden navy swirls, remembering how small he had once felt. No voice, no power. Now he was a silent force, wielding technology and strategy. The next step would be sending that text to his mother. But he waited until the cabin mood softened again, until the attendant who passed by didn't glance his way, until the moment when his message would land without obstruction. He inhaled deeply, chest rising and falling. He reflected on all he'd endured, the initial terror, the slap's sting, the tears he refused to let follow. Now came the calm before the storm. He had drawn his line. The evidence was secure. Outside the window, streaks of moonlight cut across the wing, glinting on the rivets. It reminded him of the first time he'd flown with his parents. How exciting it had felt, lifting off from the runway into the night sky. That memory brought a soft warmth to his chest. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel safe. Then he opened his eyes and picked up the tablet again. He tapped the message, draft, to Olivia. "Mom, I've got proof. Ready?" Then he hit send. The tablet chimed, a quick, soft confirmation. The message shot into the airwaves, carried by satellite to his mother's phone. He tucked the tablet away, heart pounding, unsure whether to be nervous or exhilarated. He'd done it. He'd gathered the evidence. Now he'd see what power his mother would wield. He hugged his toy airplane one last time and exhaled. The cabin was silent again, save for the distant whir of the engine and the quiet murmur of passengers. Ethan sat tall, chin high, ready for the next move. The scale was shifting. He could feel it in the hum of the AI, in the ghost of the recording indicator, in the promise of a text that was already changing everything. Ethan barely had a moment to register the soft ping of his sent message before the entire first-class cabin erupted into motion. It started as a flicker at the top of every personal screen, a tiny icon in the corner that glowed red. The seatback monitors, once displaying in-flight entertainment menus, abruptly switched to a live feed. A shaky, intimate view of Marcus Flynn's palm connecting with Ethan's small hand. The plush airplane lay forgotten on the aisle carpet, the room's warm amber light turning cold under the lens. Gasps rippled through the rows. A woman's napkin fluttered to the floor. A businessman dropped his champagne flute, the glass tinkling like a warning bell. Ethan felt his pulse flutter, part shock, part relief at seeing the moment immortalized not just in his tablet but broadcast to every set of eyes in the cabin. He realized, with a dizzying pulse of pride, that his instinct to record had fulfilled its purpose. "Is this live?" someone whispered. The question flickered like the glow of the screens. Meanwhile, a new chime sounded, this time from the overhead panel, a single, sharp beep that no passenger could mistake for routine. Marcus paused mid-stride, face paling under the cabin lights. Ethan heard the whir of the SkyGuard AI engaging its highest alert level. The camera lens above him blinked twice, one green flash melting into a red one, as if the system itself recoiled at the violation. From somewhere near the cockpit, an urgent buzz cut through the ambient hum. The captain's console, normally silent save for flight path updates, lit up with a bold message. Emergency precaution engaged, violence against minor recorded. Notice failure. Captain Hughes's calm voice crackled over the PA, helping to amplify the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as we address an urgent situation. Your safety is our priority." The words felt like an understatement. Ethan felt his stomach flip. He had never been the center of an announcement before, but in that moment he stopped being just a passenger. He glanced down at his tablet. A fresh notification glowed in his messaging app. "Ethan, I see everything. Hold tight." It was from Olivia Montgomery. His mother's voice, distilled into text, gave him a flicker of reassurance. He pressed the screen, reading and rereading her few words. Then he looked up, mesmerizingly aware of how small his victory was widening into something far greater. On the aisle carts, flight attendants exchanged hurried glances. Mira, standing near the beverage station, reached out to steady the trolley as if to anchor herself. Her eyes found Ethan's, and she offered a brief, tight smile. An unspoken apology, and a solidarity born of knowing. But the storm had only just begun. Within seconds, another alert buzzed through the cabin's PA and overhead screens, a live video call feed from Blue Sky Air's operations center. Half the screens now split into quadrants. The top left showed Captain Hughes at his console. The top right displayed a grim-faced operations manager. The bottom left looped the recorded slap in slow motion, and the bottom right revealed a live image of an executive in a sharply tailored suit. Olivia Montgomery herself. Her presence on every screen stopped conversations mid-breath. Even Marcus Flynn froze, clipboard falling from his hand as she leaned forward, gaze unwavering. The cabin's screens alternated between close-ups of her composed face and the footage of the slap. The undertone of amber lights now felt like stage lighting on a tribunal. Ethan's heart thundered. He saw her lips move, though no sound came to the cabin. This was a secure channel, audio limited to the flight deck. Still, her posture spoke volumes. One hand on the table in front of her, the other flicking open a tablet. He imagined her voice, steady, commanding. "This is unacceptable. Terminate this crew immediately. Issue public apology. Initiate misconduct protocol." On the aisle, flight attendants consulted their handheld devices, their eyes wide with shock. One whispered urgently to another, "Did you just see that? She's the owner." The realization rippled through the cabin like an electric charge. First-class privileges suddenly seemed trivial compared to the power streaming through those internal lines. Ethan felt a surge of vindication. The SkyGuard AI, the live stream, and his mother's text had converged perfectly. It was the threefold turnaround he'd never dared to imagine in his wildest hopes. The invisible safety net had snapped into place around him. He caught sight of Marcus Flynn again, crouching beside the fallen airplane toy, eyes darting between his reflection on the screen and Ethan himself. For a moment, their gazes locked. Ethan held Marcus's stare, unwavering, as if daring him to speak. Marcus's face crumbled slightly, a flicker of shame crossing the crisp uniform. Then he stood and stumbled back, paling under the reality of his own actions magnified for everyone to see. A calm but firm voice echoed, this time over the cabin speakers. By order of Blue Sky Air Headquarters, Flight NS-120's first-class crew is relieved of duty, effective immediately. We thank you for your patience and apologize for any distress caused. The crisp professionalism of the announcement only heightened the surreal, almost cinematic quality of the moment. Mira turned to Ethan and whispered, "I'm so sorry," before slipping back into her role as an usher of change rather than its perpetrator. Ethan felt tears rise again, but this time they weren't born of shame. They were tears of disbelief and relief, of seeing injustice undone in real time. He pressed the airplane toy into his lap, holding it close, and let the emotion wash over him. Around him, passengers murmured in hushed awe, some clapping quietly, others dabbing at their eyes. On the seat-back monitors, the split screen shifted focus to a brief text statement. Blue Sky Air commits to zero tolerance on child mistreatment. A full investigation is underway. As the cabin lights brightened back toward normal, Ethan felt a new sense of calm settle in his chest. The storm had passed, and though the aftermath would echo for hours, he knew the darkest moment had been reversed by a united front of technology, swift parental action, and unwavering courage. He tapped his tablet one last time, opening the thread with his mother. He typed two simple words, "Thank you." Below, her reply already waited, "Proud of you." In that charged silence, with the plane's gentle vibration underfoot and the first-class cabin's golden glow renewed, Ethan allowed himself to exhale fully. He had not only endured injustice, he had transformed it into a moment of triumph. The cabin's amber glow felt suddenly harsh, as if every light bulb had been turned up a notch. Passengers' eyes snapped from their screens to the aisle, where Captain Hughes stood framed in the doorway of the cockpit. His expression was tight, rehearsed calm giving way to steel. A ripple of unease passed through the rows. No one had ever seen the captain emerge from the flight deck mid-flight with that look. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Hughes's voice, usually so measured, carried an edge. "By directive of Blue Sky Air's operations headquarters, effective immediately, Flight NS-120's first-class crew is relieved of all duties." He paused, letting it land. Murmurs rose in the cabin. The cobalt uniform of Marcus Flynn, a uniform he'd worn with pride just moments ago, seemed to sag on his shoulders. The captain continued, "I apologize for any distress you've experienced. Alternate crew members are en route to meet us upon landing." Another pause, then, softer but unambiguous, "And one more thing." His gaze swept the cabin and landed on Marcus. "Miss Flynn, please come forward and apologize to Mr. Montgomery." Ethan's heart thudded. He barely dared to breathe. Marcus's face drained of color. The clipboard slipped from his hand with a soft clatter onto the plush carpet. Passengers straightened, wine glasses poised mid-air, all eyes on the unfolding scene. A hush. Then, Marcus's heels clicked as he walked toward seat Ton B. Each step was heavy, as though he were walking through water. Mira hovered a few feet behind him, her face pale and remorseful. Ethan clutched his Sky Fuel toy tighter, muscles coiled with anticipation. Marcus came to a stop in front of Ethan's seat. His hands trembled, and for a moment he stared at the little boy as if seeing him for the first time. Not a difficult passenger, but a human being. He swallowed, voice shaking. I'm sorry, Ethan." The apology hung in the air, simple, genuine, weighted with shame. He knelt so they were eye level. "I had no right to touch you, let alone shame you. I hope you'll forgive me." His gaze flicked to the passengers watching, then back to Ethan, waiting. Ethan's pulse thrummed in his ears. He hadn't expected Marcus to kneel. He felt a surge of compassion, an urge to reach out, to say it was okay. Instead, he pressed his lips together and offered a tiny nod, his eyes bright. "Okay," he whispered, his voice small but clear. A ripple of relief washed through the cabin. A few passengers let out quiet sighs. Some dabbed at their eyes. One elderly woman in the front row reached forward and gave Ethan's hand a gentle, reassuring squeeze. Captain Hughes nodded curtly at Marcus and rose. "Thank you, Miss Flynn," the captain said. "You may return to your seat." Marcus stood, both of his cheeks stained by shame, and retreated toward the galley. Mira shot him a sympathetic look as he passed. Behind him, 2 uniformed relief attendants slipped into the cabin from the back, their presence a silent promise of restoration. The captain then turned his attention back to the passengers. "Again, on behalf of Blue Sky Air, we apologize. We will continue to serve you the remainder of your journey with the utmost care." He tapped a button on the console, and the overhead bins. Ethan undid his seatbelt and eased himself out into the aisle. Mira was there in an instant, guiding him gently by the elbow. Passengers rose, murmured words of encouragement, and stepped aside. 2 of the replacement crew, calm, professional faces, stepped forward, offering Ethan a fresh blanket and a glass of sparkling cider. The warmth of that service felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. As he sat back down, the new attendant leaned close and whispered, "You're very brave, Ethan. If you need anything, just let me know." No clipped tone, no judgment, just genuine care. Ethan nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. He looked at his toy airplane tucked into his lap and then up to the screen by his seat, which now displayed a brief text message. "Blue Sky Air is committed to zero tolerance on mistreatment of passengers. Thank you for your courage, Mr. Montgomery." He tapped the reply field and typed, "Thank you." Then he hit send, imagining his mother reading it and offering a proud smile in her office high above the city. Around him, soft chatter resumed. The documentary crew quietly packed their equipment, the hiss of cameras powering down, a gentle exhale. One by one, first-class passengers returned to their meals, their screens, and their conversations. But everything felt different now. The cabin was more than a luxury space. It was a place where one child's quiet strength had rippled through protocol and power, rewriting the rules. From the galley, Mira returned with a small plate of honey-glazed chicken bites, Ethan's favorite new dish. She set it gently on his tray table. "On the house," she said with a warm smile. "Consider it a thank you from all of us." Ethan reached for the chicken, the flavors sweet and savory. He realized his stomach was empty of fear, of shame. He bit into the tender meat, and for the first time since boarding, he felt truly nourished. He settled back, watching the wingtip glint pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. The patchwork of ocean and clouds stretched out beneath them, infinite and reassuring. He pressed the toy airplane to his chest and closed his eyes, letting the moment sink in. The apology, the new crew, the captain's words, the text on the screen. Justice had been served, quietly, swiftly, without grandstanding. A single message, an AI's vigilant eye, a mother's decisive action, and a child's unwavering courage had turned humiliation into vindication. Ethan opened his eyes and caught Mira's gaze. She offered him a thumbs up. He returned it, genuine gratitude shining in his expression. Then he looked forward once more, toward London, toward home, toward whatever came next. The plane seemed to hum a softer tune now, one of resolution and hope. And as Ethan pressed the soft wings of his toy airplane against his heart, he knew that in this cabin high above the earth, he had discovered something even greater than safety. He had discovered his own quiet power. The cabin lights brightened to their normal glow as Flight NS-120 began its descent toward Heathrow. A gentle rumble coursed through the floor beneath Ethan's feet, but his world felt utterly still. He watched as Captain Hughes strode down the aisle, flanked by two uniformed security officers who moved with quiet authority. Behind him, Marcus Flynn and the rest of the original first-class crew were gathered, their shoulders slumped, uniforms rumpled. Passengers stirred in their seats, curiosity sparking behind polite facades. A ripple of applause broke out, soft at first, then swelling into genuine appreciation. Ethan pressed his plush airplane toy to his chest, feeling its soft wings against the fabric of his hoodie. He hardly dared breathe. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Justice coming full circle. Captain Hughes reached the front, nodded to the officers, and spoke in a crisp tone that carried clearly through the cabin. By the authority of Blue Sky Air Headquarters, this crew is to deplane upon arrival. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. His eyes lingered briefly on Marcus before shifting back to the passengers. The officers stepped forward. Marcus's lips trembled. He straightened his spine, but the pride had drained from his posture, replaced by a hollow defeat. His fellow attendants, faces once set in crisp professionalism, now looked glazed with shock and shame. Mira stood apart, her uniform crisp, her eyes sympathetic. When she met Ethan's gaze, she offered a small, apologetic nod. A hush fell as the officers gently but firmly guided Marcus toward the rear exit door. The swing curtain parted like a stage curtain at curtain call. Marcus's foot caught the threshold, and for a heartbeat he stumbled, dragging his dignity with him. The passengers watched in silence, many exchanging glances of quiet vindication. A single sympathetic handshake was offered by an elderly gentleman as Marcus passed by, a human gesture amid his professional undoing. Ethan sat tall, legs swinging slightly off the floor. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, less triumph than relief. The soothing knowledge that cruelty would not stand. He thought of his mother, Olivia Montgomery, whose decisive action had turned a moment of violence into a swift, silent reckoning. He lifted his toy, turning it over in his hands as if inspecting the badge of honor stitched into its wing. Behind him, the replacement crew moved in, their presence calm and poised. They offered apologetic smiles and swift, efficient service, fresh blankets, bottled water, a soft reassurance that the cabin was theirs again. One attendant refilled Ethan's tumbler with cold water and whispered, "You did good." Ethan managed a modest nod, his voice caught somewhere between pride and lingering shock. The cabin crackled with low conversation. Some passengers reached for their phones, sharing the story, clips of the apology, the captain's announcement, the officer's escort. "Did you see that veteran attendant get let off?" someone murmured. "He never had a chance against her." The story wove itself into the cabin's tapestry, a narrative of quiet courage and swift justice. Ethan leaned back, eyes closed, letting the moment wash over him. He'd weathered scorn, fear, and pain without a single raised voice. His calm resolve had shone brighter than any reprimand. He imagined his mother reading the live updates, her lips curving into a proud smile as she oversaw the company she'd built. Outside, the city lights of London emerged beneath a blanket of clouds, flickering like distant stars. The engines throttled back for landing, and the cabin's vibration softened. Captain Hughes's voice came over the PA once more, this time warm and genuine. "We'll be on the ground shortly. Thank you again for flying with us." No mention of the drama, just a professional closing, as if Blue Sky Air had always intended to make things right. Ethan opened his eyes and turned his toy airplane so its nose pointed toward the window. He imagined the runway lights glowing ahead, guiding them home. He pressed the plush wings to his cheek in a small gesture of solidarity. He'd lost something that day. His sense of safety, briefly. But he'd gained something far greater. The knowledge that even a quiet child could spark change. As the first-class doors opened and footsteps echoed toward the jet bridge, the cabin's mood shifted from awe to relief to excitement. Luggage was stowed, screens powered off, and the silent hum of passengers preparing to disembark filled the air. Ethan lifted his tablet, scrolled through the messages, and saw a final text from his mother. "I'm so proud of you. Welcome home, champ." A soft smile spread across his face. He tucked the tablet away, stood, and reached for his toy airplane. The officers at the rear gave him a respectful nod as he passed by, and Mira slipped an extra blanket over his arm with a wink. Outside the window, the runway lights grew brighter. Ethan stepped into the aisle, shoulders squared. The world beyond that plane awaited him. Grandparents, a loving mother, and a promise of dinner at his favorite restaurant. But in that moment, he carried something else with him. Proof that compassion and calm strength could overturn even the harshest injustice. He took a breath, inhaling the crisp, recycled cabin air one last time, then followed the others off the plane. First class had never felt so empowering. The moment Flight NS-120 came to a complete stop at Gate 42, the cabin lights brightened fully, and the gentle click of seatbelts unfastening rippled through the first-class section. Around him, passengers stretched their arms, reached overhead for their luggage, and exchanged warm smiles after an eventful journey. But Ethan Montgomery sat still, perched in his plush cream leather chair, his sky-new toy airplane snug in his lap. He watched the overhead door slide open, revealing the jet bridge's glow, and felt his heart flutter. A soft voice whispered in his ear, a breath of comfort. Mira, the young attendant who had shown him kindness from the start, leaned close and offered a small, encouraging smile. "You ready?" she asked gently, her tone free of rigidity for the first time. Ethan nodded, his chest swelling with a quiet pride that surprised him. He slipped out of his seat, gripping his toy and his tablet, and followed Mira down the aisle. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, the smell of warm terminal air greeted him, along with a rush of soft footsteps and quiet murmurs from the arrival lounge beyond. Ethan slowed, peering around the corner, and there she was. Olivia Montgomery, standing tall and poised, her tailored navy coat buttoned just so, a tablet in one hand and her phone in the other. The tension of the flight melted from Ethan's shoulders in an instant. "And then," Olivia called, her voice bright but soft. She had that practiced executive calm, but her eyes sparkled with relief and pride. Ethan felt tears threaten again, but this time they were tears of joy. He broke into a run, his legs a little wobbly but determined, and threw himself into his mother's arms. Olivia wrapped him tight, one hand smoothing his hair, the other holding his toy airplane. "You were incredible," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." Her voice cracked ever so slightly, betraying the emotion she usually kept under control. Ethan buried his face in her coat, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender and fresh linen. Mira watched from the doorway, her expression soft. She gave Ethan a thumbs up before slipping back to assist the replacement crew with their duties. The newly boarded flight attendants offered nods and congratulations as they passed, their faces a mixture of respect and admiration. Olivia led Ethan down a short corridor to the VIP arrivals lounge, a quiet refuge away from the bustle of the general terminal. Plush couches faced a panoramic window overlooking the tarmac. A small table in the corner held an assortment of pastries and chilled juice. Ethan's favorite strawberry lemonade. He settled onto a couch, toy in hand, and sipped his drink as Olivia sat beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We'll be home soon," she said, glancing at her watch. "But first, I wanted to make sure you were okay." Her eyes searched his face. Ethan looked up, brushing crumbs of pastry from his lap. "I am," he replied, voice steady. "Thanks to you." Olivia smiled, her expression both tender and commanding. "You did all the hard work, kiddo. You showed everyone exactly who you are." She tapped her tablet, bringing up a secure email draft. "I've sent out the public apology and statement. Blue Sky Air's zero-tolerance policy will be front and center. And I'm establishing a new scholarship fund for kids with disabilities in aviation programs." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Your courage sparked more than just a reprimand. It'll help others for years to come." Ethan's chest filled with warmth. He leaned back into the couch, hugging his airplane toy to his chest. "That's really cool." A chime from Olivia's tablet announced incoming responses, messages of support from senior leadership, customer feedback praising the swift action, and even a short note from the CEO. "Well done, Olivia." And "Ethan." Olivia tapped to bookmark the message, then set the device aside. Outside the window, Flight NS-120's wingtip caught the last glow of the setting sun. Ethan watched as luggage carts rolled up and crew members unloaded baggage that would soon reach the carousel. He realized how different this scene felt from when he first boarded. No longer a place of fear, but one of resolution and new beginnings. Olivia reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small badge, a miniature version of the airline's logo in sky blue and silver. "I want you to have this," she said, pressing the pin into Ethan's hand. "Consider it a token of your bravery." Ethan's eyes widened as he examined the badge, its metal cool and smooth. He pinned it to his jacket, feeling every bit as official as the uniformed attendants. She stood and extended a hand to help him up. "Ready to go home?" she asked. He took her hand without hesitation. As they walked back through the lounge, Olivia paused at the door, looking back at the plane. A gentle smile played on her lips. "Let's get you home, champ," she said softly. They stepped onto the bustling concourse together, no longer separated by service carts or aisle curtains, but united as mother and son. Ethan held his toy airplane in one hand, Olivia's hand in the other. They passed families reuniting, travelers hurrying toward connections, and baggage claim areas lit by fluorescent light. Yet nothing felt ordinary. The world seemed brighter, more hopeful. At the terminal exit, a driver in a crisp uniform held a sign reading Montgomery alongside a sleek black car, Olivia's preferred executive transport. The chauffeur opened the rear door, and Olivia lifted Ethan inside. She buckled him in, then slid in beside him with a soft exhale. The door clicked shut, and the car pulled away from the terminal, its taillights glowing red in the evening light. Ethan pressed his toy airplane to the window, watching the terminal recede. The city skyline loomed in the distance, lights twinkling on familiar skyscrapers. He felt safe, secure, and profoundly proud. Behind him, Olivia checked her tablet one last time, then powered it down. She reached back and tousled his hair. "You did something amazing, Ethan," she whispered. "You used your voice, even when you couldn't speak." He turned in his seat and smiled up at her. "I had help." She laughed softly, a genuine, heartwarming sound. "I'll always have your back." As the car sped toward home, the final glow of sunset vanished, leaving a sky full of stars. Inside the vehicle, mother and son sat side by side, the soft hum of the engine a lullaby of peace. Ethan closed his eyes, clutching his toy airplane and the badge on his jacket. feeling the gentle rhythm of reassurance ripple through him. No harsh words, no sudden threats. Just a quiet reunion that spoke louder than any slam of a clipboard. In that golden moment, Ethan knew the journey had changed him forever. He was no longer just a passenger. He was a guardian of his own story, carried home by love, courage, and the unwavering promise of justice. The following morning, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blue Sky Air's headquarters, illuminating the sleek atrium with its polished marble floors and sweeping staircases. Ethan sat beside his mother on a curved white sofa in the executive lounge, his Sky Blue toy airplane tucked under one arm. Behind them, a small stage had been set up for a press conference, complete with a podium bearing the airline's silver and azure logo. Olivia Montgomery straightened her blazer and tapped the lapel mic, greeting the sea of camera flashes and journalists gathered before her. Ethan watched her, so poised and confident, and felt a swell of pride in his chest. Whatever nerves lingered from yesterday's events had melted away, replaced by the warm certainty that good could come from hardship. She cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Olivia began, her voice calm yet resonant. "Yesterday, Flight NS-120 witnessed an incident that no airline should tolerate. I want to personally apologize to Ethan Montgomery and to every passenger who was distressed by that unacceptable behavior." She paused, letting her words sink in. Behind her, a large screen flickered to life, showing stills from the incident. The moment Marcus Flynn's hand connected with Ethan's, the stern look on the attendant's face, and Ethan's brave composure. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Ethan pressed his hands together, feeling their warmth. Olivia continued, "At Blue Sky Air, we're committed to creating an environment where every passenger, regardless of age or ability, feels safe and respected. That's why today I'm announcing a new initiative, the Blue Sky Wings Foundation, a $5 million fund dedicated to supporting children with disabilities in aviation education and accessibility programs." A ripple of applause broke out. Ethan's eyes widened. $5 million. That was as vast as the sky his toy airplane once soared through. He looked at Olivia, whose expression softened as she nodded to him before returning to the podium. "This fund will provide scholarships for young people pursuing aviation studies, grants for families to access adaptive flight training, and partnerships with airports to improve accessibility features," Olivia explained. "Most importantly, it's named in honor of my son, Ethan, whose courage demonstrated that even the smallest among us can inspire the largest of changes." Journalists scribbled notes and snapped photos as the crowd buzzed. Ethan felt a light tickle of excitement. His name, etched into the foundation's title, felt like a promise of hope for kids all over the world. He glanced at his toy airplane, imagining it guiding endless possibilities through open skies. After the official statements, journalists approached for interviews. A news anchor stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Ethan, can you tell us how you feel about the foundation named after you?" Ethan took a steadying breath, hugged his toy airplane one last time, and spoke clearly, his voice steady. "I feel really happy. I hope other kids know they can stand up for themselves, too." His words, simple yet powerful, resonated through the microphones. Olivia wrapped an arm around his shoulders as the cameras clicked furiously. A crowd of onlookers, executives, colleagues, and a few familiar faces from the flight stood to the side, offering warm smiles and thumbs up. Mira, the young attendant who had first shown kindness, gave Ethan a discreet nod of pride. Once the press conference concluded, Ethan and his mother retreated to a quieter lounge area. A cluster of executives in tailored suits and dresses approached, eager to offer congratulations. "100% well done," said the CEO, extending his hand to Ethan. "Your bravery and your mother's leadership will set new standards across the industry." Ethan shook the CEO's hand, feeling the weight of possibility in that brief gesture. He glanced at Olivia, whose eyes shone with satisfaction. Together, they had turned yesterday's nightmare into today's beacon of progress. Later, in a small reception room off the atrium, trays of pastries and fresh fruit awaited. Ethan selected a bright raspberry tart, savoring its sweetness as he scanned the room. Colleagues chatted about next steps, new training modules, revised protocols, community outreach events. The plans were ambitious, but Ethan felt certain they'd succeed. He spotted a tablet display in the corner showing social media feeds. Hashtags like Blue Sky Wings, Child Justice, and Montgomery Strong scrolled past. Posts from around the globe poured in. Children with disabilities, families, and advocates celebrating the news. Ethan leaned forward to read a few. My daughter has autism and dreams of being a pilot. Thanks to this fund, she might get her first lesson. Seeing a big airline step up to support kids with disabilities. You did that, Ethan. A warm flush rose to his cheeks as he realized the scope of change unfolding. It wasn't just about one flight or one incident. It was about a wave of empathy and action, spreading far beyond a single cabin. Olivia knelt beside him and brushed a loose strand of hair from his forehead. You started something incredible, Ethan, she said softly. This is just the beginning. He smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. Thank you for believing in me, he whispered back. She ruffled his hair. You believed in yourself. As they left the reception room, executives and guests parted to let them pass. Ethan's badge, the miniature airline logo he'd pinned to his jacket, glinted in the morning light. He held his toy airplane high for a moment, as if showing it off to the world, before tucking it back into his backpack. Together, mother and son exited the headquarters into the bright day. Sidewalks bustled with pedestrians hurrying to meetings, street vendors called out their breakfasts, and a soft breeze carried the promise of new beginnings. Ethan took a deep breath of fresh air. The city's heartbeat felt alive, just like his own. He looked up at his mother. She smiled and offered her elbow, which he took gently. Ready to head home? She asked. He nodded, stepping forward with a sense of purpose. He had faced adversity in silence, recorded the truth, and watched it transform into action. Now, as the world around him embraced the ripples of change he'd set in motion, he knew that courage, even quiet courage, could indeed reshape skies and hearts alike. Ethan settled into his favorite armchair at home, afternoon light warming the room. His Sky-new toy airplane lay in his lap and his tablet glowed with notifications, messages of support, stories from other families, and news of the Blue Sky Wings Foundation's launch. He tapped record and looked into the camera. Hi everyone, he began, voice steady. It's Ethan. I want to say thank you for being with me. From that awful moment on Flight NS-120 to now, when we've launched a $5 million fund for kids with disabilities. He held up his toy airplane. This little plane helped me stay calm. If you have an object that gives you comfort, let me know in the comments. And while you're there, drop your city where are you watching from today. Ethan leaned forward. I've read your stories about standing up for yourself or helping someone else. Share one below. We might feature it in my next series, Your Voices, Our Wings. He smiled. If you believe in kindness and fairness, please hit like and subscribe. It helps more people find these stories. And ring the bell so you know the moment a new video is up. The camera caught the screen behind him showing the Foundation's website. We've set up scholarships and grants for adaptive flight training and aviation studies. There's a link in the description. Check it out or share it with someone who could benefit. Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. I want to hear your ideas too. What should our next cause be? Airport accessibility maps? Scholarships for mechanics with disabilities? Dream big and drop your suggestions below. He took a breath and added, "If you're writing or creating a story about resilience or fairness, maybe something from your own life, send it our way. We'll highlight the best ones in your voices, our wings." Leaning back, he offered a genuine smile. "Thank you again for being part of this journey. Your kindness has sparked real change, and I couldn't have done it without you. From the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of every kid who will benefit, thank you." He tapped end stream, and the tablet clicked off. In the quiet that followed, the late-day sun slanted through the window, and Ethan felt a quiet pride. He was more than a passenger. He was a voice for others, proving that even one small act of courage can take flight.